Hello and good evening. It's pretty late and I'm on. So I don't know who's available to jump on with me today. But I'm here. I'm here, like Miss Seeley said. Yeah. So today is Why Wednesday. It's the second Wednesday of July. We are already halfway through the year. Sheesh, we are already smack dab in the midst of summer and enjoying the summertime. Not really enjoyed the last couple of weeks as I lost a niece that we just laid to rest officially last night or yesterday. So thank you guys so much for your prayers continually for my brother and my sister-in-law and my niece and nephew and just everybody because this loss was very unexpected and she was a gem. We love and miss her. But yeah, so I'm here and I wanted to consider a couple of the questions that I had. And the one question which you see in the description there is talking about children. And I made it a point not to disregard any question, regardless of the subject or the nature of it, because everybody's question is valid. It's just that I wanted to make sure that I was the right person to even dialogue about it. And so I just quickly and briefly asked God, like, should I even bother even considering answering this question or talking about it at least? You know, I don't have my own children, so what do I know about unruly children? What do I know about children who, when they talk back, why is it that they do what they do? And the Holy Spirit was like, well, you know relationships. So it's not necessarily the role that individuals play that you're speaking to. You're speaking to the fact that there is a connection between the two of these individuals, and you can speak to the dynamic of that alone. So not necessarily specific to whomever wrote this question or submitted this question. Like, I'm not speaking to what goes on in your household. I'm not speaking to what kids go through and what parents go through. I'm not speaking to those things because I don't have firsthand knowledge and experience to speak on those things. But what I can speak to is relationships in general. So that's what I'm going to just talk about. But the first thing I wanted to bring up when it comes to, you know, just having children, that, I mean, at some point, the child becomes really difficult to deal with. I wasn't necessarily that person. I mean, I made a lot of mistakes. I got into a lot of things that I shouldn't have done, and connected with a lot of people that I shouldn't have connected with, which, you know, were bad influences to me. My parents, you know, brought me in a very, you know, astute and that's not the right word, but very calm, relaxing, loving. You know, it wasn't as eventful other than going on vacations. It wasn't a lot of drama, you know, in the midst of our household. And there wasn't a lot of just crazy things happening. It was just, you know, your traditional family. And I got into some stuff at school that I shouldn't have. I got into some friendships and relationships that I shouldn't have, that were not for me and best for me. And I learned the hard way, the best way sometimes, in order to not go down that road or that path again. But as far as talking back to my parents, like, that's one thing I can say. If I talk back to my parents, they never heard it. They never saw it. They never witnessed it. It would literally be me possibly mumbling loud enough for them to hear me. And if they did, it was probably a backhand shortly thereafter. If my mother found out that I did something wrong, she would just be like, I was mama's baby. So when it comes to discipline, she typically didn't discipline me. She would tell me right from wrong, but she wouldn't actually physically discipline me. That would be reserved for dad. So she would still tell dad. So dad found out everything. And he got to decide how I was going to be disciplined. And I don't care what he decided. I didn't want any of it. But as I think back over my life and the fact that, like I said, I didn't really have I didn't have that gut, that gall, that courage or that boldness to talk back to my parents. And I guess the bigger question for that scenario is why? Why did I not feel like I had some type of, audacity to speak back to my parents? And I think it was because in my household, they set a standard. And that standard, it never changed. Now, you could possibly hear, and I wish one day I can bring one or two of my siblings on with me so they can tell the difference between how they were raised versus how I was raised, because there are several years in between a lot of my siblings. Half of my siblings could be my parent. That's how much older they are to me. So now the way they were raised was like, that was like military. Versus, if you compare that to the way that I was raised, I'm the youngest of 12 children. So by the time I came around, the majority of my siblings were already, adults and having their own kids, getting married, finishing school, doing their own life. There was only a few left at the house that were still like finishing up whatever it is that they were finishing up, as far as schooling and stuff like that and starting their families. So when I came around, my parents, I don't know, it seemed like my parents were like, okay, we're tired. By the time I came around, I really didn't get that much. There wasn't a lot of strictness. Now there were still curfews. There were still times I had to be off the phone. There were still expectations and chores that I had to do around the house. Like there were still standards and things, but I guess that's what I'm getting to. There were standards. And not only were there just standards as far as how to be in the house and among family, but there were standards as far as like how I should talk and how I should move around, how I can maneuver in the midst of my parents. Like they said it in such a way that I knew. Like my siblings, I didn't even have to ask my siblings. Like I watched them and I was able to glean from their experiences and realize, okay, they didn't get away with this. And I see the way my dad's putting the fear of God in my siblings. So let me take a seat. Let me shut it down. And so I can say that I think, we should consider when we have children or anyone that is disrespectful, like, what are the standards that you put into place? And, morally, what do you stand for? And was that something that you established? Or are you establishing that with your children consistently? And then outside of that, like, I know that's very foundational to who you are. So who you are eventually is something that you display to your children. And so they should be following suit, unless they get caught up in the wrong crowd and they just decide to, decide on, going for, let's just try to see what fate will allow. Okay, try me. The next thing I would say, and this is what the Holy Spirit brought to my attention when I was thinking about this earlier, is boundaries. Like how consistent are you with establishing one boundary and sticking to it? Or did you establish a boundary and then you eventually remove that boundary? Because think about it, as kids, if we tell I know for me, like I have plenty of nieces and nephews that I, have had to keep and watch and discipline in certain situations, keep them from harming themselves or something like that. No, don't do that. Things like that. But if you have a child and they want to touch the stove and you constantly tell them no, and then at some point they keep trying, and then you're tired of telling them, so you just don't tell them. Like, you're gonna learn on your own. So you run the risk of allowing that child to see that boundary, there's a gray area to it, and that's what's harmful to any relationship. The moment that an individual, depending on what they feel and what they think and how they care about you and what the love is, the commitment level is, once they start seeing that gray area, they are going to take the step over, and they're going to test you, and eventually they're going to manipulate you. And that's what kids do all the time. The moment that you let up, it's just when you let up, you're turning that black line to a gray line. They now see there's gray areas, so now I can just take a step over here. You don't, dog, pets do it too. I've seen so many videos of pets, let me move I can keep going. You're not gonna say nothing. You're not gonna say nothing. So I think that boundaries are so very important, even, once you're older. Like I said, it's about being in a relationship. So it's not just the dynamic of the title of mother and father, or mother or parent and child. It's simply because you've established a relationship. And so boundaries are important regardless, as important as standards that you establish, but both have to be consistent. You have to be committed to even establishing those in your relationship, so that the individual, the other party, knows where you stand. So if they don't know where you stand, they're going to keep pushing those buttons. And I think another thing with boundaries, and I'm treading real lightly here, as an individual who does not have her own children, sometimes letting go is very, very important. Sometimes removing yourself from a situation is very important. And I can imagine, I can understand that when it comes to parenting, it's hard to let go of especially with a child moving into, teen and potentially moving up to young adulthood. Like, it's hard to see them, going from a baby to now this is a whole grown person in my house, right? So I can understand that, but I believe that there is a way for you to eventually, over time, consistently draw those boundaries and move yourself out of that situation, move yourself out of that conversation, move yourself out of that season that they're in, so that they can fully see themselves for who they are and recognize they're wrong, recognize how they think and how they process information, how they process and make decisions, and what's most important to them, what's most valuable to them. Because you and I both know, all of us know, that you typically don't know what you've got until you've lost it. And whether that be my time, my attention, my money, my major care and concern, where it's not just care and concern that I speak, it's care and concern with my presence and with my intervention. Like, sometimes you got to pull back. And once you start pulling back, however, like God, this is where God comes in, obviously. Like, we're not doing this thing on our own. We're not learning how to walk away and establish boundaries and standards and relationships on our own, or at least we shouldn't be, because God is, He's the ultimate. Like, He is the one that teaches us how to be in a relationship. So why not rely on His wisdom? So we do have to spend time with Him and talk to Him and wait for Him to intervene and give us the wisdom that we need and help us to make the best choices and decisions when it comes to how we parent or how we are just committing ourselves in a particular relationship. But the child is talking back and it's been going on too long. then consider what boundaries you've allowed that child to continue to overstep. I mean, we do it all the time in so many other areas in relationships. We do it when we're in an intimate relationship. Because we love them so much, because we love her so much, because we don't want to lose them. So we continue to allow them to overstep those boundaries. And at that point, the boundaries are no longer solid. They're just barely ash. You could barely see them, like those lines on Luke 12 that are just barely there. Like, you need to get that paint and start drawing those lines again and making it very clear. This line cannot be stepped on or over under no circumstances. If you do, this is the consequence of it. You lose my energy. You lose my ability to help you and support you in this area. You're going to lose a whole lot. So they're going to begin to recognize there are consequences to even talking back. There are consequences to even rolling your eyes. Like, I was scared to roll my eyes when it came to my father. Like, I waited until I got into my bedroom to mumble and complain and talk crazy and cuss or whatever I was doing. I didn't do it in their presence. And I prayed to God it never got back to them, because if it did, I would still get bumped down real good. For me to be reminded who's running the show, because it's definitely not me as a child. So that's my take on it. That's really all I wanted to share. It's just, a relationship is a relationship, and the dynamics really are just, it's based on how a person sees their relationship and how they define it. That's really what the dynamics are. But a relationship is a relationship, and the types of qualities that we want in relationships are really still foundationally true as it pertains to communication, drawing boundaries, respect, trust, all those things. Those are still foundationally important. And no matter what type of relationship it is, it's still required. We can't just say, oh, because I'm a parent, I don't have to establish good communication skills or establish boundaries. Like, you still have to do it. Like, it's a relationship. There is a mutual connection between you and your child. There is a mutual connection between you and your spouse or your significant other. And these are actual significant connections that you want to not only just have, but you want to develop them. You want to grow and mature them. You want to strengthen them, right? And so there's responsibilities in that. And so as parents, I truly believe that we have to uphold our end of the bargain when it comes to that. Sometimes, I'm sure, it's some hard decisions that you have to make, and some hard no's and some hard yeses that you have to offer. And I know that takes time, and that's, again, where God comes in. So just wanted to share that with you guys. I hope it helps somebody. And pray that you guys have a good rest of your week and a great weekend. And until next time on Fourth Wednesday, I'll see you in a little while. Toodles. Love you. Bye.